So Spinner begins chapter 11 by discussing, in part, the old concept of a soul, a spirit or anima, and a body. Separate entities where the body is controlled by the spirit, willing its flesh prison forward until it finally gets released upon death, into presumably some form of an afterlife. Spinner concludes in his opening that the scientific study of behavior is not wholly unconscious of the fact that it studies humans, a common critique of the science, but he puts forth that it is not dissimilar to the study of physics or biology. To study a person's behavior is to study an organism from the species Homo sapien reacting to their external environment. He brings up the concept of knowing the self introspectively, and philosophers throughout the ages have struggled with the concept of the self, and as man being separate from the natural community. The way we feel about the self has not really altered since the Enlightenment. Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," or as Spinner used Diderot's "I am what I am." These are both introspective, mentalist ideas about personhood. They rely on observation. They rely not on observation, but of feeling. Therefore, when a person experiences change, they can be said to have an identity crisis, or remove the trouble parts of their thoughts and simply say, "I was not myself that day." The verbal community allows for this mentalist view because our language, and really all language, is dedicated to feeling rather than observation. How are you feeling rather than what has made you feel this way? However, just because one recognizes environmental influences does not mean that their answer would be any more accurate. We observe things inconsistently and internalize or absorb information based on our experiences. Only through careful analysis of external factors can one truly understand the self. And while knowing that a person is a human body riddled with personal experiences and genetic history, Spinner posits the question, what can we know of others? Our verbal community, as I've said, allows for others to communicate a more mentalist perspective, to convey feelings or thoughts of, "I did this because I was angry." One can never truly know what someone else is thinking or how an experience made them feel. Spinner talks about sympathy and one's ability to know another, but he concludes that the idea of knowing someone is to be able to predict their behavior. Knowing oneself leads to managing one's behavior. If you can extrinsically evaluate how a situation affected you, you can alter or change your behavior when confronted with similar stimulus. It's not enough, he says, to know how you felt when a situation occurred, but rather what behavior you exhibited. And Spinner says that operant conditioning is absolutely relevant when attempting to make a behavior more or less likely to occur. The system of rewards and punishment is not only associated within the field of science, it's part of our daily lives. Negative reinforcers are the ones we often come across. Censure from the church or state veiled with threats of punishment, whether legal or supernatural. Relationships between friends are marked by either approval or disapproval of one's actions. We desire the positive reinforcement, and so change our behavior in order to gain it from our peers. Contingencies are put into an environment, or can be, to directly affect a behavior. Spinner uses the example of a stop sign at an intersection. The stop sign has no overt punishing authority. To see it is to simply see a stop sign. However, the contingency put into place of not following the appropriate behavior, stopping, calls for a known positive punishment, getting a ticket. Therefore, the contingency is effective because of the understood reinforcement. If you run the stop sign and get a ticket, you may feel angry or upset, but next time you come across a stop sign, you can change your behavior so that the outcome is different. On the other hand, to manage another's behavior is something we grasp an understanding of quite young. Babies cry for food, thus gaining the mother's attention, and are reinforced by food. We learn that if we are nice to our fellow classmates, they will share their toys at recess. Managing the self is taught through rules, maxims, and proverbs, as Spinner says, and that it comes much later than managing others. One can use the observations in managing others to manage the self, and whereby learning how the environment and stimulus affect others, we have a better scientific grasp on being able to observe ourselves. So my question is, do you agree with Spinner's assumption that communication between people often leads to a fundamental misunderstanding or misinterpretation on the part of the listener and what the speaker is saying?